What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks into what should be a routine morning show interview, only to find himself facing off against a host who seems determined to make headlines at any cost? The tension in the Good Morning America studio was so thick you could cut it with a knife, and what unfolded next left everyone watching absolutely speechless. Before we dive into this explosive confrontation, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me what you think really went down here. Tom Hardy had arrived at the Good Morning America studios that morning, expecting the usual promotional circuit interview. His latest film was generating Oscar buzz, and his publicist had assured him this would be a straightforward chat about his craft and the movie's themes. What he didn't anticipate was walking into what felt more like an interrogation than an interview. Michael Strahan sat across from him, that familiar television smile plastered across his face. But there was something different in his eyes. Something that suggested this wasn't going to be the pleasant conversation Hardy had prepared for. "Tom Hardy, everyone," Strahan announced to the cameras, his voice carrying that practiced television enthusiasm. "Thanks for joining us this morning." "Thanks for having me," Hardy replied, settling into the chair with his characteristic quiet intensity. He was dressed simply, a dark jacket over a plain shirt, his posture relaxed but alert. "So let's jump right in," Strahan said, leaning forward slightly. "Your new film deals with some pretty heavy themes: addiction, family trauma. I have to ask, how much of this comes from personal experience?" Hardy's eyebrows raised slightly. It wasn't an unusual question for an actor, but something in Strahan's tone felt invasive, probing in a way that went beyond professional curiosity. "Well, as an actor, you draw from various sources?" Hardy began carefully. "Life experiences, observations, research. It's about creating something authentic for the character." "But come on, Tom," Strahan pressed, that smile never wavering. "We've all heard the stories about your past, the struggles with substances. Surely this role hit close to home." The shift in the room was immediate. Hardy's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and his eyes sharpened. "I think you're confusing personal growth with exploitation, Michael. My past is something I've been open about when it serves a purpose, not when it serves ratings." Strahan chuckled, but it sounded forced. "Hey, I'm just asking the questions our viewers want to know. You're a public figure. People are curious about what makes Tom Hardy tick." "Are they?" Hardy's voice remained level, but there was steel underneath. "Or is this more about what makes Michael Strahan's interview memorable?" The tension was building, and you could see it in every line of Hardy's body language. His hands, which had been casually resting on the chair arms, were now still and purposeful. This wasn't the relaxed promotional interview either man had expected. "Look," Strahan continued, seemingly oblivious to or ignoring the warning signs. "You've made a career playing tough guys, anti-heroes, characters on the edge. I'm just wondering how much of that is acting and how much is the real Tom Hardy coming through." Hardy was quiet for a moment, and in that silence, you could feel the entire studio holding its breath. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but carried an unmistakable edge. "The real Tom Hardy is someone who respects the craft enough to prepare thoroughly, someone who takes his work seriously, and someone who expects the same level of professionalism from the people he works with, including interviewers." Strahan's smile flickered for just a moment. "I think we're getting that professionalism right now, aren't we? This is what good television looks like, real conversation between real people." "Real conversation," Hardy repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. "Is that what you call this? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels more like you're trying to create a moment that doesn't exist." The cameras were still rolling, capturing every micro-expression, every shift in body language. The producers behind the cameras were probably thrilled. This was the kind of unscripted television that generates clips and headlines. But Hardy wasn't playing along with the game. "I think our viewers appreciate honesty," Strahan said, his tone becoming slightly more defensive. "They want to see the person behind the performances." "Then maybe you should try asking about the performances," Hardy shot back, his voice still controlled but with an undertone that suggested he was rapidly losing patience. "About the months of preparation, the research, the collaboration with directors and fellow actors, instead of fishing for personal drama that has nothing to do with the work." Strahan leaned back slightly, perhaps finally recognizing that he had pushed too far. But instead of backing down, he doubled down. "Well, when you put yourself out there as an actor, especially in roles that deal with such intense subject matter, don't you think it's fair for people to wonder about the connection?" Hardy's response was immediate and sharp. What I think is fair is for journalists to do their homework, to ask questions that serve the audience's understanding of the craft, not their appetite for gossip. What I think is fair is for morning television to elevate the conversation instead of dragging it down into the gutter. The words hung in the air like a challenge, and suddenly Strahan's practiced television demeanor began to crack. For just a moment, Strahan's mask slipped, and what emerged wasn't the polished television personality millions of viewers knew, but something rawer, more defensive. His jaw tightened, and his eyes flashed with something that looked remarkably like wounded pride. "Look, Tom," Strahan said, his voice losing some of its manufactured warmth. "I've been doing this for years. I know how to conduct an interview. Maybe the problem isn't with my questions. Maybe it's with someone who can't handle a little scrutiny." Hardy's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. He sat back slightly, his hands folding together with deliberate calm. "Scrutiny," he repeated, the word dripping with quiet disdain. "Is that what you call this fishing expedition?" "I call it journalism," Strahan fired back, his voice rising just enough to indicate he was losing his composure. "Real questions for real people, not some sanitized publicity nonsense where we pretend celebrities are above normal human curiosity." "Normal human curiosity," Hardy said, nodding slowly as if considering the phrase. "Tell me, Michael, when you were playing football, did interviewers spend their time asking about your personal demons? Or did they focus on your performance, your preparation, your contribution to the team?" The comparison clearly stung. Strahan's face darkened, and his carefully maintained posture became more rigid. "That's completely different. Football is about statistics, about measurable performance. And acting isn't?" Hardy's voice remained infuriatingly calm, which only seemed to agitate Strahan more. "Every choice an actor makes is measurable. Every moment on screen is a result of specific preparation and technique. But you're not interested in any of that, are you?" Strahan leaned forward aggressively, his television smile now completely abandoned. "What I'm interested in is giving our audience something real, something honest. Not some actor hiding behind intellectual superiority and fancy words." "Intellectual superiority?" Hardy repeated, and for the first time there was the hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth, but it wasn't a pleasant one. "That's an interesting way to describe basic professionalism and respect for one's craft." "Don't patronize me," Strahan snapped, his voice sharp enough that several crew members visibly flinched. "I've earned my place at this desk. I've worked for everything I have." "Have you?" Hardy asked quietly, and the two words carried more weight than a shouted accusation. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're trying to build your reputation by tearing down someone else's." The accusation hit its mark. Strahan's face flushed, and his hands gripped the edge of his desk. "You think you can come in here and lecture me about my job? You think because you've done a few movies, you understand television?" "I understand respect," Hardy replied, his voice never rising above conversational level, which made his words all the more cutting. "I understand preparation. I understand the difference between asking questions that serve a purpose and asking questions that serve your ego." "My ego?" Strahan's voice cracked slightly, revealing just how deeply the comments were affecting him. "You're the one who can't handle a simple interview without turning it into some kind of intellectual debate." Hardy tilted his head slightly, studying Strahan with the kind of intensity he brought to his most complex characters. "Simple interview, is that what you call this ambush? Because I came here to discuss a film, my craft, the work that dozens of people poured their hearts into. Instead, I find myself dealing with someone who seems more interested in creating controversy than creating understanding." "Controversy sells," Strahan said, and immediately looked like he regretted the admission. "I mean, engaging television requires real emotion, real conflict." "There it is," Hardy said softly, and his voice carried a note of something that might have been disappointment. "Controversy sells. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Not journalism, not serving your audience, but manufacturing drama for ratings." Strahan tried to recover, his media training kicking in automatically. "That's not what I meant. What I meant was that our viewers connect with authentic moments, with real human interaction." "Real human interaction?" Hardy mused. "Like attacking someone's personal history to generate a reaction? Like trying to provoke an argument where none existed? That's your definition of authentic?" The questions were delivered with surgical precision, each one designed to expose the hollowness of Strahan's justifications. And it was working. Strahan was visibly struggling to maintain his composure, his carefully constructed television persona crumbling under Hardy's relentless, quiet assault. "I don't have to justify my methods to you," Strahan said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "This is my show. This is my house. And if you don't like how things work here, maybe you shouldn't have agreed to come on." Hardy's eyebrows rose slightly. "Your house?" he repeated. How illuminating. "Because I thought this was supposed to be about serving the viewers, about informing and entertaining them. But apparently, it's really about serving you." "Everything isn't about you, Tom," Strahan shot back, his voice now openly hostile. "Some of us work in the real world, where we have to deliver results, where we can't just disappear into character and pretend the real world doesn't exist." "The real world?" Hardy said, and now there was genuine steel in his voice. "The real world is where people create things of value, where they contribute something meaningful to the culture." "What exactly are you contributing here, Michael, besides manufacturing conflict for entertainment?" Strahan's face was now openly flushed with anger and embarrassment. He had completely lost control of the interview, and worse, he was losing it on live television in front of millions of viewers. His next words came out in a rush, fueled by frustration and wounded pride. "You know what?" Strahan exploded, his voice echoing through the studio. "I'm tired of actors like you thinking you're better than everyone else, thinking you're some kind of artist when really you're just playing dress-up for a living. At least I accomplished something real, something that matters in people's daily lives." The outburst was so unexpected, so raw, that for a moment the entire studio fell silent. Camera operators exchanged glances, producers were frantically whispering into their headsets, and the few audience members present sat in stunned silence. This wasn't morning television anymore. This was a public meltdown happening in real time. Hardy, however, remained completely still. If anything, Strahan's explosion seemed to have the opposite effect on him, a calming influence that made his response all the more devastating when it came. "Playing dress up?" Hardy repeated quietly, his voice carrying easily through the now silent studio. "That's an interesting perspective from someone whose job consists of reading from a teleprompter and asking questions written by other people." Strahan's eyes widened, realizing too late that his emotional outburst had given Hardy all the ammunition he needed. "That's not, I don't just read. I conduct real interviews with real impact." "Real impact?" Hardy nodded thoughtfully. "Like this morning, you mean? Is this the kind of real impact you're talking about?" "Because I have to say, Michael, if this is your idea of conducting an interview with real impact, I think you might want to reconsider your definition of both real and impact." The words were delivered with such calm precision that they felt like physical blows. Strahan was now visibly sweating, his carefully styled hair beginning to show the strain of his emotional state. "You think you're so clever?" Strahan said, his voice shaking slightly. "Sitting there with your calm little responses, acting like you're above all this. But you're not fooling anyone. You're just another actor who thinks the world owes him something." Hardy's expression didn't change, but when he spoke, there was a note of genuine curiosity in his voice. "The world owes me something? That's fascinating." "Because I wasn't aware I had made any demands. I came here to discuss a film, to talk about the work of talented people who spent months creating something they hoped would move audiences. What exactly do you think I believe the world owes me?" Strahan opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, clearly realizing he had painted himself into a corner. His face was now openly red with embarrassment and anger. "I think," Hardy continued, his voice still maddeningly calm, "that you're confusing me with yourself. Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you're the one who believes the world owes you something. The world owes you drama, controversy, moments that will generate headlines and social media buzz. The world owes you content for your show, regardless of whether that content has any value or serves any purpose beyond entertainment." "That's not true," Strahan protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "I provide a service. I inform people. I give them news and entertainment." "Do you?" Hardy asked, tilting his head slightly. "Because what service exactly have you provided this morning? What have you informed your viewers about? What news have you delivered? What entertainment have you offered beyond the spectacle of watching you lose control of your own show?" The questions hung in the air like accusations, and Strahan seemed to physically shrink under their weight. He looked around desperately, as if hoping someone would throw him a lifeline, but the crew members were all studiously avoiding eye contact. "You came on my show," Strahan said weakly, grasping for some kind of authority. You agreed to be here. I did, Hardy agreed. I came here in good faith, expecting to have a professional conversation about work that I'm proud of, work that represents the efforts of hundreds of talented people. Instead, I find myself in the middle of what can only be described as a character assassination attempt by someone who seems to have confused journalism with tabloid sensationalism. Strahan's mouth opened and closed several times, like a fish gasping for air. The complete reversal of power in the interview was now undeniable, and it was all happening on live television. But here's what's really interesting, Michael, Hardy continued, his voice taking on an almost conversational tone that somehow made his words even more cutting. In your desperation to create a moment, to manufacture some kind of controversy, you've actually revealed something much more compelling than anything you were fishing for in my personal life. What's that supposed to mean? Strahan asked, though he looked like he really didn't want to know the answer. You've revealed yourself, Hardy said simply. You've shown your viewers exactly what kind of journalist you are, exactly what your priorities are, exactly how much respect you have for your guests and your audience. And I think that's much more interesting than anything you could have dug up about my past. The studio was now completely silent, except for the hum of the cameras, which were still rolling, capturing every moment of Strahan's humiliation. You've shown them that you're willing to ambush a guest who came here in good faith, Hardy continued, his voice gaining momentum. You've shown them that you're more interested in creating drama than delivering information. You've shown them that when challenged on your methods, you resort to personal attacks and emotional outbursts rather than defending your journalism with facts and professionalism. Strahan looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. His earlier bravado was completely gone, replaced by the look of someone who had just realized they had made a terrible mistake in front of millions of people. Most importantly, Hardy said, leaning forward slightly, you've shown them that when someone refuses to play your game, when someone won't be bullied into providing the drama you're looking for, you don't have a backup plan. You don't actually know how to conduct a real interview. The words were delivered with such devastating precision that you could almost see them landing like physical blows. Strahan was now completely deflated. His entire persona collapsed. I think, Hardy said, sitting back and checking his watch with deliberate casualness, that our time here is probably better served if I leave now. Unless, of course, you'd like to try asking me about the film I came here to discuss, though I suspect that ship may have sailed. He stood up slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled, and began to remove his microphone. The action was so final, so definitive, that it seemed to break the spell that had fallen over the studio. Tom, wait, Strahan said desperately, his voice cracking slightly. We can start over. We can talk about the film. Hardy paused in removing his microphone and looked directly at Strahan for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried clearly through the studio. Michael, I think you've already told your audience everything they need to know about both of us, and I don't think there's anything left to say. With that, he finished removing his microphone, placed it carefully on the chair, and walked off the set with the same quiet dignity he had maintained throughout the entire confrontation. Behind him, Strahan sat in stunned silence, the cameras still rolling, capturing every moment of his complete and utter defeat. The interview that was supposed to be a routine promotional appearance had become something entirely different, a masterclass in how true professionalism responds to manufactured drama, and how integrity can triumph over sensationalism even in the most hostile environment. What did you think of this explosive confrontation? Did Tom Hardy handle this the right way, or should he have taken a different approach? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and make sure to subscribe for more behind-the-scenes drama from Hollywood's biggest stars.